Hello everybody, welcome back to the third part of the Urban Crossroads St. Louis series. This is City Crafted, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the future of St. Louis. Now this video has taken me a long time to make as I've had a lot that I've wanted to include. And as of 2026, I firmly believe the future of not only St. Louis, but the United States as a whole, rests increasingly in the hands of the next generation, as many of the decisions shaping our cities have pushed us towards outcomes that are both dangerous and unsustainable. This video is my reaction to this and my attempt to imagine a better path forward. Now I understand why people in St. Louis like to ruminate on the past. It was a time when the city was both booming and we are one of the country's premier destinations. However, today this cannot be further from the truth. St. Louis has faced constant population loss to the surrounding county for the last 7 decades and has largely been viewed as a place to avoid. How has one of history's strongest and most dynamic economies turned what was the country's 4th largest city into a decaying and hostile place? The subject of this video will be looking into what caused this collapse and what we can do to repair it. But before diving into this, let's look into what makes a city work in the first place. Hopped in, took flight. It's morning and you step outside. On your walk to work, you pass by a neighbor and give them a soft hello. You see a mom walking her 2 kids to school. A jogger goes by with their dog and gives a polite head nod. A restaurant is setting up its outdoor seating. Nothing remarkable is happening, yet the neighborhood feels alive. This rhythm of daily life is what Jane Jacobs called the sidewalk ballet, an unplanned dance we perform simply by moving throughout our streets. It naturally occurs when people feel comfortable walking, lingering, and being present in a place. With this presence comes safety, not because anyone is enforcing it, but because people are casually watching. Jacobs called this eyes on the street. It's a form of safety that naturally occurs from people going about their daily lives. But when streets are redesigned for speed and efficiency, the ballet disappears. People stop walking. People stop lingering. Driving becomes the default option, and public life gets drained away. This is what happened to St. Louis. Over the last 7 decades, our streets have been reshaped for cars instead of people. As fewer people used the street at a human level, the ballet vanished, and with it, the safety that naturally occurred. When safety depends primarily on law enforcement rather than everyday presence, a place stops behaving like a city. Rather, it becomes a concrete jungle, and this is the path that St. Louis has taken. But this way of building cities is relatively new. For most of human history, from Mesopotamia to Athens, and even all the way to pre-modern St. Louis, cities have emerged organically. Across cultures and continents, they all shared the same, uniquely human DNA, a set of patterns that allowed places to flourish. So then, what makes a good city? Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. First, multiple uses. People living near where they work, shop, and socialize. This allows daily life to stay close, convenient, and affordable. Second, short blocks. Many paths create choice and encourage curiosity and safety for people walking. Third, old and new buildings mingling together. Cities have historically grown by adding to what has already existed, not by replacing it. This keeps housing more affordable and reduces displacement often associated with new builds and gentrification. And finally, density. This doesn't mean overcrowding or towers, but rather having enough people to support safety, economic stability, and resilience when hard times do inevitably come. These patterns are the common DNA of cities throughout history, including pre-modern St. Louis. Yet today, they can feel new or even radical. Not because they are, but because we've forgotten what safe and livable streets designed for people feel like. The generations of people who do remember this version of the city are passing on, and with them, the lived memory of what an alive city actually is. This is cultural amnesia, and it's happening all across North America. It wasn't until I lived in Madrid and Barcelona that I realized something was glaringly off about American cities. If humans have built successful cities for thousands of years, then why are our current cities seemingly struggling to survive? What changed? What went wrong in not only St. Louis, but all over North America? Let's take a look. Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. For status quo, we'll surely pay the cost. There are many reasons St. Louis has declined over time, but none of them were accidental. In the decades after World War II, the city was redesigned to do something fundamentally different. A place once shaped around daily human life was rebuilt for speed, efficiency, and short-term financial return. Cities across the country became financial instruments, optimized to move money and commuters to and from the suburbs. This marked a break from how cities had always grown. Traditionally, cities evolved incrementally, with residents investing in places over the long term. Post-war suburban expansion, combined with modernist planning, replaced this logic. Uses were separated, neighborhoods were frozen in place, and downtowns were reduced to single-purpose business districts. Short-term financial thinking replaced long-term civic health, and St. Louis is living with the consequences today. These priorities were made explicit in plans like the 1947 St. Louis City Plan, which labeled entire neighborhoods as blighted and slated them for removal to make way for highways. As it turns out, transportation is never neutral. It reflects what a city values. Are streets places to be or places to move through? Is speed for commuters more important than comfort for residents? In modern St. Louis, the answer is clear. Transportation no longer serves the city serves transportation. Nowhere is this more visible than downtown, where surface parking and highways hollow out what should be a place teeming with life, and streets sit empty outside of major events. The city is more sensitive to where cars are stored than where people will live. How streets are actually used reveals priorities more honestly than any official statement. In the decades following the war, these priorities were backed by enormous sums of money. Highways, mega projects, and large-scale clearance were funded in the name of progress. Jane Jacobs described this phenomenon as catastrophic capital, investments so large that they became inflexible, designed to receive funding and scale rather than good outcomes. Instead of maintaining and adapting existing neighborhoods, St. Louis erased them, kneecapping its own tax base in the process. There's another truth buried here. Infrastructure is not an asset, it's a forever occurring liability. Roads, bridges, and highways can only be sustained if the land around them produces enough long-term value to maintain them. Urban highways do the opposite. They displace residents, they suppress nearby land values, and they impose permanent maintenance costs. Over time, this drains a city of its resilience. So how do we move forward? Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. For status quo, we'll surely pay the cost. Squelch our wealth, abundance gone to waste. Lost what it meant to know your people. Get to know your place. In Happy City, Charles Montgomery offers a useful framework. He contrasts an old transportation paradigm, where cities are designed around a single dominant mode, the car, with a new paradigm, where as many modes as possible are integrated into daily life. In car-centric cities, streets are built for speed and distance, while walking, biking, and transit become unsafe and inconvenient. Car dependency fails everyone, including drivers, who are forced to deal with other drivers and more traffic. In multimodal cities, people have real choices. Streets support access, interaction, and human connection, not just movement. St. Louis remains largely stuck in the old paradigm. The vision of the future imagined in places like General Motors' 1939 Futurama still shapes our streets today, even though we now understand the true cost. As Jason Slaughter of Not Just Bikes puts it, the more car-friendly a place is, the shittier it is to be there. And ultimately, that's what most people actually care about. They don't think about design decisions and how we pay for things. They notice how they feel while they're actually there. This is what matters most, how cities feel. We often talk about induced demand as a traffic problem, but it's really a design problem. Cities and their people respond to what is made easy. When driving is the most convenient option, we get more traffic. When housing variety is legal and simple to build, we get affordability and community. When walking and transit are both comfortable and reliable, streets fill with life. What we make easy, we get more of. And that's why
there is no solution to car traffic except viable alternatives to driving. There's no solution to car traffic except viable alternatives to driving. There's no solution to car traffic except viable alternatives to driving. There's no solution to car traffic except viable alternatives to driving.
There was a time when stepping outside meant stepping into the city. You didn't need a destination or a plan, but somewhere along the way, this disappeared, and most of us never noticed when it left. We don't usually talk about what St. Louis lost when it changed. We talk about traffic, we talk about crime, and we talk about decline. But beneath all of this, there's a quieter truth. We lost places that worked without effort. Places where daily life unfolded naturally, where being out in the city didn't require a plan, a car, or a reason. This loss wasn't dramatic, it was gradual, and because it happened slowly, many of us never noticed. The clearest place to see this loss is in how our streets and downtowns are used today. Streets are no longer public places to gather. They exist to serve everyone's individual transportation needs. Much of our social infrastructure has been replaced by social media, eroding the casual, everyday interactions that once made cities feel alive. The sidewalk ballet and eyes on the streets faded after World War II, and by the 2020s, the effects are impossible to ignore. But cities behave the way they are designed to behave, which means they can be redesigned. We can bring back a lively and safe city if we choose to prioritize it. Downtowns once thrived as full neighborhoods, not office monocultures. Downtowns are places where people lived, worked, ate, and lingered day and night. A healthy downtown is a place that never sleeps, a defining characteristic of cities. Today, much of downtown St. Louis empties out after 5 p.m. Office workers go home, streets fall quiet, and the absence of regular life creates a vacuum. This vacuum doesn't stay empty. When places have a designated time of use, the off hours invite neglect and blight. Downtown doesn't feel safe at night because people avoid it. People avoid it because it's been designed to go empty. The suburban experiment took a lot from our cities, but none of these outcomes are permanent. The future does not have to look like the present, and St. Louis can choose a path forward that works better for everyone, city residents and suburban drivers alike. Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. For status quo will surely pay the cost. Squelch our wealth, abundance gone to waste. Lost what it meant to know your people. Get to know your place. Pave over prosperity, call it progress. Course correction seemingly harder than the wrecking ball. Decisions not set in stone make it hard to change. If cities respond exactly as they are designed to respond, what would it look like to design St. Louis differently? Good urbanism is like growing a tree. Trees need good soil, water, sunlight, and space. When these conditions exist, the tree grows on its own terms. We can guide it, but we cannot force its shape without harming it. Cities work the same way. The role of government isn't to control growth, it's to create the conditions for healthy growth. Small blocks, connected streets, and infrastructure that makes walking, biking, transit, and even driving possible. When these conditions exist, cities naturally adapt to the needs of their people. For the last century, we tried to control the tree instead. Through rigid zoning and separation of uses, we froze neighborhoods in place. Housing became scarce, commutes grew longer with each passing year, and the kinds of neighborhoods people love became illegal to build. Ironically, we already know what we prefer. When we go on vacation, we seek places where life is easy, places where we can walk, linger around, and easily stumble into daily life without planning every moment. This is called revealed preference. So then, what does progress mean in the 21st century? Are cities machines for efficiency? Or are they places to live in and enjoy? Is wealth just another drive-through and big box store? Or is it the long-term value built by communities allowed to adapt while they invest in themselves? Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. For status quo will surely pay the cost. Squelch our wealth, abundance gone to waste. Lost what it meant to know your people. Get to know your place. Pave over prosperity, call it progress. Course correction seemingly harder than the wrecking ball. Decisions not set in stone make it hard to change. A change that left community and beauty behind, sold back as a luxury. It's no wonder we're all just consumers in this world of ever-expanding sterility. But I do still think there's hope for St. Louis. Looking to the past shows a lot of what the future can hold. The modern housing crisis is largely a crisis of prohibition. We've made it illegal to build the very neighborhoods that once built American wealth. Meaningful zoning reform will not come from grand new plans or mega projects. It will largely be subtractive. We must legalize what works. Things like duplexes, corner stores, backyard cottages, and missing middle housing help create vibrant and resilient places. This incremental, mixed-use pattern defined most American neighborhoods before World War II, and remains one of the most adaptable forms of urban development to this day. Density also matters, but not all density is equal. The sweet spot for vibrant urban life is often 2 to 6 stories, enough to support local businesses, but not so much that housing becomes standardized and disconnected from the street. Density is a great tool for bringing diversity of housing and people into an area, but too much of it risks standardizing housing and eroding that diversity. Towers have a place downtown, but the priority across St. Louis should be gentle density woven into existing neighborhoods. Rebuilding streets at a human scale benefits everyone, including drivers. Car dependency forces nearly every trip to be made by a car, concentrating traffic into a single system while simultaneously removing practical alternatives. Every trip that can be made on foot, by bike, or by transit is one less car competing for road space. This reduces congestion and makes traffic easier to manage. Our Midwestern neighbor of Carmel, Indiana, offers a great example of what a suburban retrofit can achieve. By redesigning its streets with roundabouts, a walkable town center, and human-centered public spaces, Carmel transformed itself over several decades into one of the most desirable suburbs in the country. Traffic became safer and more efficient, property values increased, and public life returned to its streets. St. Louis can choose to follow this same path. Roundabouts, narrower lanes, protected bike paths, and slower speeds don't create chaos and gridlock. They create places worth being in. Historically, gathering places have led to towns. Today, we have towns without gathering places. Human-scaled streets can restore these shared spaces and mark a turning point in how both the city and county grow in the coming decades. Transit is only as effective as the land use around it. One of the biggest mistakes North American cities make is pairing expensive public transit with car-dependent land use. A billion-dollar metro line surrounded by surface parking cannot function as true urban transit. When riders are forced to drive to stations, the system undermines itself. St. Louis already faces this challenge. We have 2 metro lines, yet many stations are surrounded by parking instead of homes and businesses. These stations function more as park and ride facilities than transit-oriented places. This is a missed opportunity that weakens both the effectiveness of our transit and the public's perception of it. Transit and land use must work together. Density without transit struggles to move people efficiently, and transit without supportive land use struggles to attract riders. If St. Louis wants its metro to succeed, housing and mixed-use buildings must be allowed within walking distance of stations. This means upzoning neighborhoods surrounding the stations. Parking lots should gradually become neighborhoods, and stations should be accessible by walking, biking, bus, and car, not just driving. When rail funding isn't possible, high-quality bus rapid transit with dedicated lanes can serve as a practical precursor to more permanent infrastructure. Fast, reliable BRT can extend mobility across the city and county without compromising future upgrades. Protected bike lanes should be built all over the city and connect to one another as well. Our current painted bike lanes are dangerous and undermine the effectiveness of the network, while also hurting the public's perception of them. Reliable public transit is more than transportation, it's autonomy. It gives people who cannot drive the freedom to fully participate in society. In the past, St. Louis's streetcars allowed young and old alike to navigate the city independently. But today, many are dependent on others to move around their own communities. Linking transit with walkable land use restores this independence. This is not radical, it's common sense. It's no secret that malls across the country are dying. Once mid-20th century gathering places and cultural landmarks, many now sit hollowed out and underused. Yet this decline presents a rare opportunity. Malls are already equipped with infrastructure, utilities, roads, and vast expanses of parking, making them some of the most promising large infill sites available in American suburbs. St. Louis is home to a handful of closed-aired malls, each in varying degrees of success. The redevelopment of the former Chesterfield Mall into a mixed-use downtown, complete with housing, offices, and a public square, offers a glimpse of what these sites can become. But instead of fully demolishing these sites, we should reuse the existing structures and treat them as anchors for new mixed-use neighborhoods. Because our malls sit along highways, they are uniquely positioned to become regional transit hubs. Bus rapid transit and future rail connections can make these sites accessible to everybody, while excess parking provides space for infill housing, park and ride use, and everyday amenities like grocery stores or gyms. Together, this creates resilient mixed-use centers that function beyond shopping alone and help ease regional housing demand. Malls are currently positioned to be America's best accidental opportunity for retrofitting the future into one that is happier, healthier, and more walkable. When connected by fast, reliable transit, these redevelopments can become models of intentional, transit-oriented repair, connecting these sites to the wider city. The lesson here is that we don't need new land. We need to reuse what we already have. North St. Louis has been one of the region's most left behind areas. Once home to some of the city's most affluent residents, it declined after deindustrialization, redlining, and suburban flight. Today it contains many abandoned Victorian-era houses and schools, and carries a reputation for danger and disinvestment. Yet within this loss lies one of St. Louis's greatest opportunities. North St. Louis has the bones of a real city: short blocks, narrow streets, and a historic mixed-use fabric. Because so much has been lost or removed, the area holds a rare chance to rebuild incrementally and humanely, rather than through mega projects like Pruitt-Igoe or isolated downtown developments like Ballpark Village. Revival should focus on mixed-use infill. Missing middle housing, courtyard blocks, and local ownership should be prioritized. The goal is not to suburbanize the North or flood it with luxury towers or housing. It's to restore the resilient urban fabric that once allowed these neighborhoods to build wealth and thrive in the first place. The city will never beat the suburbs at its own game, so it's vital they don't even try. St. Louis must succeed by acting like what it is: a city. A compelling model for traditional urban infill is Guatemala's Ciudad Cayala, which demonstrates how human-scaled streets and buildings create beauty and demand for the area. North St. Louis can draw heavy inspiration from this project. However, you can't get a Jane Jacobs city through Robert Moses means, so unlike Cayala's master-planned approach, North St. Louis's strength should be gradual, resident-driven growth which generates long-term prosperity. Preserving historic buildings while adding new ones allows families to build local wealth without displacement and helps keep prices in the area affordable. However, for this revival to succeed, the North must be connected to fast, reliable transit. Walkable land use and public transportation together can support the human-scaled streets the city needs and reintegrate the area into the broader city and county. North St. Louis does not need to be remade. It needs to be allowed to grow again at the pace of the people who already call it home. Done carefully, this could be the city's greatest example of equitable urban revival, and act as a model for what American cities can be when we allow them to function like cities. Since St. Louis and St. Louis County separated in 1876, they have functioned as one region governed by many jurisdictions. While the split may have served a purpose at the time, today it fragments planning and silos resources that should be working together. The region operates as a single economic system. Residents live, work, and travel across city and county lines every day. Yet it plans as if it were many unrelated places. If St. Louis is going to grow as one region, shouldn't it be planning as one? This fragmentation makes coordinated transit, housing, and infrastructure planning difficult. Land use decisions rarely align across borders, which encourages short-term competition between jurisdictions and weakens long-term cooperation. When housing, jobs, and services drift further apart, everyone pays through longer commutes, higher infrastructure costs, and slower coordination during moments of crisis. A city-county merger would not solve every problem, but it would reduce bureaucratic duplications, align incentives, and allow long-term regional planning that is difficult under the current system. Let's end the divorce and reunite the region to match how St. Louis functions in everyday life. The solutions to many of St. Louis's challenges already exist. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to apply what has already been proven to work. The Crow Design Manual for Bicycle Traffic, used across the Netherlands and available in English, offers tested street and bicycle designs grounded in decades of real-world success. Cities like Copenhagen and Amsterdam show how these principles create safer, more livable streets. Closer to home, Carmel, Indiana shows that suburban retrofit is not only possible, but profitable, while Ciudad Cayala illustrates the enduring appeal of human-scaled infill and urban form. Our challenge will not be inventing a new solution, but rather granting ourselves permission to do what already works. With these changes, St. Louis can return to building the human-centered places that once made it one of America's great cities. We can create walkable streets and destinations that people travel from around the world to experience. After nearly 80 years of misguided development, there is no quick fix. But cities are shaped by steady, incremental progress. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. And I do truly believe that St. Louis can be revived. We simply have to allow it. Hopped in, took flight, built a life outside that urban blight. Empty streets, blocks swept away. What we don't notice affects us every day. We shape what we build, and what we build shapes us. For status quo will surely pay the cost. Squelch our wealth, abundance gone to waste. Lost what it meant to know your people. Get to know your place. Pave over prosperity, call it progress. Course correction seemingly harder than the wrecking ball. Decisions not set in stone make it hard to change. A change that left community and beauty behind, sold back as a luxury. It's no wonder we're all just consumers in this world of ever-expanding sterility. But I do still think there's hope for St. Louis. Looking to the past shows a lot of what the future can hold. A future centered around the people who live in it. But don't blink, time's a-tickin'. An opportunity tends to only strike once. So let's be stewards of the past, the present, and create the future. One more holistic, one made for us.